It's so interesting that the next few months are going to be really, really fun for smartphones, and it has nothing to do with the flagship segment. And that's because a lot of companies are slated to bring out sub $500 phones that still hopefully provide a good everyday experience. We already saw something in the iPhone SE, the revived iPhone SE, which I already have a video or two of here on the channel. Review on that coming in a little bit. However, I did want to talk about another one that has just landed on my doorstep and I finally got it out of its box. We'll unbox and talk for a little bit about this right here, the Samsung Galaxy A51, a sub $400 phone that's available right now, providing hopefully a lot of Samsung's best experiences. Okay, so I'm going to be sort of rolling through this video, and also this is going to be on the podcast, Tech and Tea with Joshua Vergara. Podcast link is in the description below. I'm going to be rolling through this particular talk kind of in stages because I just unboxed this phone. I have a few thoughts about the look and about the first setup and about the performance just from the first hour or two of actually being on the phone. All right, so the unboxing experience was actually really simple. You just get the phone and a charger, and notably the charger is of the, let's say, slower variety. It comes with an A to C cord, so you're not going to be getting the super fast charging that you might expect from the flagship Samsungs. And also my unit didn't have any of the fun plastic bits to remove because it was provided directly from Samsung and actually comes installed with a Verizon SIM already. So I'll be able to get some LTE immediately on here, and we'll talk about that performance as I get into the full reviews. However, the other thing to note is that this phone is becoming more widely available across the major carriers here in the US, which is why this is becoming a bit more on the forefront as far as our talks in smartphones today. A few hot takes as far as the feel and the look of the phone. It definitely feels like a phone at its price. It's plastic all around, it smudges up really quickly, and the haptics in particular have sort of that higher pitched vibration to it that immediately makes you think that this is a bit of a cheaper phone. Even though the screen is of a decent size, it is full HD resolution and also has a little bit of a bezel around there. I know some of you really get mad at that, but this is not an edged display after all, so there does have to be a little bit of extra bit around it. And then of course there's that punch hole at the top, dead center, with that 12 megapixel front-facing camera. As you can see, always on display is here, so that's a nice little convenient feature coming down from the flagships to this $400 phone. And there are going to be little bits like that throughout Samsung One UI that I think most people will appreciate and don't often get at a phone that you can just sort of pick up like that compared to like the $1,200, even $1,000 phones. And as far as the look is concerned, despite not having that curve on the front, it still feels fairly compact, gives you enough screen real estate to probably enjoy any media on like Netflix or YouTube, and on the back, you have this sort of holographic look that also has this prism somewhere down on the lower third. So you'd see a little bit of a cut in the actual pattern of the backing, and I really like that look. The other thing that I really appreciate is that the camera hump, while there is one there, is quite minimal. There does have to be a tiny bit there, I guess, to accommodate the amount of things that are inside. After all, there are 4 lenses. But yeah, the phone manages to be fairly slim and not have a huge camera bump at the same time. But it's at that point that the specifications get kind of interesting because while you might think that a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor is in here and it might even provide things like 5G, right now we're looking at an Exynos processor, which is really rare to see in the US. And if this phone is going to get a really wide release and actually make it into the hands of a lot of people, you're actually getting a more Samsung experience than you probably have ever had before. And on top of all of that, the other specifications on this phone include things like 4 gigabytes of RAM, which already make it sound like not the best phone for power multitaskers. But again, that's not the point of a phone like this. This is supposed to be the affordable phone that gives you good experiences every day, even if it's not the absolute snappiest or, let's say, even the most futuristic feeling of the bunch. But there are certain places in this phone that I'm excited to try out because Samsung tried to put a little bit of their flagship experience into the A51. Obviously, that's going to have to do with the rear cameras. There are 4 cameras on here, a 48 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, a 5 megapixel depth camera, and instead of having a telephoto to round it out, there's actually a dedicated macro camera. 5 megapixels for the macro lens may not be super high, and it might not end up being the most detailed photos. You can judge that for yourself right now as I took a few examples with the flowers right outside this window. But yeah, it's nice to see that there's a little bit of thought put into there, and zoom is obviously something Samsung wants to relegate to their S20 line. After all, 100 times space zoom was one of the main marketing terms for it. But why don't we go ahead and go through a number of different camera samples, and I'll just do a little bit of the usual slideshow, and we can talk about some of the quality. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Here's a little surprise. Even if the processing package feels like 2017, the front-facing camera actually feels a little bit more like 2019. The wide angle of it is actually not too bad. I can fit quite a bit in this frame. And I'm actually recording at 4K, which is not really something you expect from a phone that is below $500. This 12 megapixel shooter on the front in that punch hole brings a few of the things we're used to in flagships, so it's nice to see that be the case. While I'm going through those photos, I'm just going to continue talking about just the early experience with this phone. I did do a transfer from my OnePlus 8 Pro, so all of the power applications, let's say, especially games, that are on my OnePlus 8 Pro were transferred over, so I'm trying to do the kind of one-to-one experience shift, except it's going to be on a phone that may or may not be able to handle literally everything that I throw at it. That 4 gigabytes of RAM is definitely the main spec that worries me a little bit. But you still get plenty of bells and whistles on here, including an in-display fingerprint sensor, you get face unlock, and you are able to do pretty much everything that you can expect from Samsung One UI, including even the edge lighting, even though this screen is a flat screen, it doesn't have the curve on the front. And again, this is still my initial setup and getting into the phone to begin with, so obviously in the act of downloading all of your applications and transferring over all of your data, the performance of the phone is going to dip during those tasks. So I'm not going to really knock the phone a whole lot yet, but I will admit that I feel a tangible difference in the speed and smoothness of the phone in usage when compared to, and this is important, when compared to the flagships that I have just mentioned, the Galaxy S20 Ultra, for example, or the S20 Plus, or the regular S20, or of course the OnePlus 8 Pro, which I'm transferring all of my data from. Now, while the iPhone in particular might have been able to provide a very smooth experience because of its processor and its software tuning, we have to see where Android is going to land on there because there are so many different ways that these can be configured. Samsung went with a processor that is technically 2 to 3 years old in the Exynos, and maybe a Snapdragon 765 would have helped its case a bit more. But we're still going to see where that lands as far as everyday usage, and that's what I want to bring you in my full review. So look forward to a look at the Samsung Galaxy A51, especially a who is this for type video. I don't know if I'm really going to do a top 5 complaints video on this because maybe that's being a little bit too harsh on a phone that's not meant to be like giving you the world, let's say. But yes, a who is this for is definitely on the table because I want to know, especially from all of you, if you think that this phone would really fit for you, based on price point, based on availability across all of the major carriers now at this point, and obviously based on the specifications, whether or not it will be able to keep up with you. If you have questions about this phone that you want me to try and cover in those ultimate videos, make sure you let me know in the comments down below, make them be known, and then drop some likes on this video if you're watching the YouTube side, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, because if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the link below so you can listen to my thoughts and ramblings and musings every single week. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to call it on this one. And until my next video, I hope you stick around. And I will just remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.